peeps? You're listening to She's My Cherry Pie, the baking podcast from the Cherry Bomb Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jessie Sheehan. I'm a baker, recipe developer, and author of 3 baking books, including my latest, Snackable Bakes. Each Saturday, I'm hanging out with the sweetest bakers around and taking a deep dive into their signature bakes. Today's guest is Gemma Stafford, the Irish chef, baker, and host behind the hit YouTube show Bigger Bolder Baking. She's also the author of 2 baking books, Bigger Bolder Baking, A Fearless Approach to Baking Anytime, Anywhere, and Bigger Bolder Baking Every Day, Easy Recipes to Bake Through a Busy Week. Gemma is a classically trained chef who also studied under the legendary Darina Allen at Ballymaloe Cookery School in County Cork, Ireland. She now lives in Los Angeles with her family and loves helping folks bake with confidence with her trusted recipes and techniques. She's been featured on baking shows like Nailed It on Netflix and Best Baker in America on Food Network. She's launching her own network later this year called the Bigger Bolder Baking Network. Gemma joins me to talk about her best-ever Irish scones. We chat about textures, key ingredients, and how Gemma gets her slightly sweet, crunchy exterior and moist interior. With St. Patrick's Day coming up, you don't want to miss this convo. Thank you to Plugra Premium European-style butter for supporting today's show. As some of you know, I've been a big fan of Plugra for some time now, and was introduced to it at my very first bakery job when I was just a newbie baker. Fast forward to today, I'm a professional baker, cookbook author, and recipe developer, and I continue to rely on Plugra for all my baking needs. My fridge is always stocked with Plugra sticks and solids. I especially love that Plugra contains 82% butter fat. The higher butter fat content means less moisture and more fat, and as bakers know, fat equals flavor. Plugra butter is also slow churned, making it more pliable and easy to work with. I do a lot of baking this time of year for work and for myself and my family. Comfy bakes like my pistachio chocolate anytime buns and cinnamon sugar buttermilk donut holes, and I always reach for Plugra unsalted butter. I've also been making a lot of yeasted breads lately, and I love the buttery flavor Plugra adds to my dough. Plugra Premium European-style butter is the perfect choice from professional kitchens to your home kitchen. Ask for Plugra at your favorite grocery store or visit Plugra.com for a store locator and recipes. Let's check in with today's guest. Gemma! So excited to have you on She's My Cherry Pie and to talk scones with you and so much more.
It's my honor. Thank you so much for having me.
First things first, I've read that it was really your mom who showed you how to cook. She made everything from scratch every day for her family of 7, taught you to make scones, which we're going to talk about shortly. And what I love is that you've said that she baked scones on any day of the week. They were not reserved for weekends. And that most importantly, and I love this so much, you guys ate dessert like every night of the week. It was not a special occasion thing, which is exactly how I was raised. And I was wondering if you could talk about that and what were the kinds of sweets and other baked goods that you guys were all eating on the regular.
You know, it's funny. We did have desserts like often during the week, and it wasn't just kept to the weekends and special occasions. I have shared some of those recipes in both of my books, and I will tell you the kind of baked goods in Ireland. Number one, it's comfort food. A lot of the recipes are for cold evenings. And that's when I think about those times is when I was younger in Ireland in the winter and we were having rice pudding. We were having something called an Eve's pudding, which is Victoria sponge on top of some Bramley apples, like what we use for stewing apples. Apple crumbles like you would not believe. You know, different types of crumbles and things like that, but definitely stuff that can be made from ingredients that you have to hand, something that's quick to whip up and easy and no fuss. And that really is what Irish cooking is all about. It's both savoury and sweet. It's kind of like what we're all about. It's easy, simple recipes where you get like lovely results. When it comes to me, people ask, what do you like to make for yourself? We have a lot of cakes and desserts in our house, Jessie, from our shoots, from our filming and all those things. But when I say to Kevin, I want my husband, let's make a dessert, I always go for a crisp or a crumble or something like rice pudding. And those are the kind of things I gravitate towards because that's what I grew up on. And those lovely food memories
So you studied cooking at the Dublin Institute of Technology and then continued your studies under Darina Allen at Ballymaloe. First of all, did you always know that you would go to cooking school? And then also, can you tell those listeners that don't know about Ballymaloe?
I did always know that I was going to be a chef because of my mom and because it was the only thing I gravitated towards, Jessie, which was like, this is what I want to do. I told my mom at a very young age, I either wanted to be a chef or a teacher. So when it came to filling out my college application when I was like 17, my mom sat down with me and we picked from, like you said, to the Dublin Institute of Technology, which has one of the biggest catering colleges in the country. I picked everything from hotel and catering hospitality to supervision, professional cookery, which is what I ended up studying, and culinary arts. So everything in the food realm. So I ended up studying professional cookery, which meant training to be a chef. Ballymaloe is run by Darina Allen. And Darina Allen, in the 80s, she appeared on TV in Ireland. And I was born in 83. So I grew up with her on telly. My mom said to me when I was a young girl, she said, when you grow up, you can go to Ballymaloe, which was just like, I mean, to be able to go to study at Ballymaloe was a dream come true. So I went and I studied at college. Mom said, if you go to college and you graduate, then if you still want to go to Ballymaloe, you can. So I did that. After graduating college, I went down to Ballymaloe and I did Darina's longest course, which is a 3-month certificate course. During this time, you're staying on the property, you're down on this lovely, I'll kind of paint a picture for everybody. It's a self-sufficient organic farm down in East Cork in a place called Shanagarry. It has almost like its own ecosystem. They have their own cows, and this is now there could be even more, but they have their own bees, they have their own cattle, they have their own dairy. It's really unbelievable. They have all their own chickens, all their eggs come from their own chickens. They make their own bread. It's just really an amazing cooking school. It's kind of whimsical and just very a dreamy place, but it's such a gorgeous part of the country where it's like just a lot of countryside. You're really out there, you know, outside a big city, but you're living on a farm. While you're doing the course, you're staying, you know, on the property or close by in a little fishing village, which is just gorgeous. You know, you go in early in the morning and you're there all day long and you do in the kitchen, you know, practical. And then in the afternoon, you often go in and you sit and Darina or Rachel Allen or Rory O'Connell or somebody, one of the teachers does a demo. You'll see this is what you're going to be doing the next day. Then you go into the kitchen the next morning and you recreate and you work in teams or sometimes I think you work individually. It's just 3 months of intensive cooking. And I say intensive because it's all day, every day, you know, Monday to Friday, but it's not intensive in the true meaning of the word. You know, I mean, for me, I just couldn't get enough.
I love that. And then at some point you moved to the U.S.
Yes.
And you had some restaurant jobs in some Michelin-starred restaurants and you worked in some bakeries. What I want to hear about actually is the catering business that you started where you specialized in over-the-top breakfast creations for tech companies. That sounds like heaven to me. And I want to hear about those over-the-top breakfast creations and also how that came to be your catering company's specialty.
Mm-hmm. This is such a kind of funny part of my life. I was working in a Michelin star restaurant, which I loved, in San Francisco by myself. I went there not knowing anybody, as they'd say in Ireland, not knowing a sinner. I went on Craigslist, which was what you did back then, you know, if you worked in the food world looking for a job. And I found one at this restaurant and I had a great time. I was earning such little money that I couldn't afford to work here anymore. I could barely afford to pay my rent. I rented a tiny room in Hayes Valley in San Francisco. Ireland was going through a recession at the time, 2009. So it hit Ireland a little bit later than America. And I had a moment where it's like, I have no safety net. I'm here in a city by myself. I don't have any family. I have friends that I work with. I have no safety net of money. All I have is my paycheck every 2 weeks. And that's all I have to survive on. I don't think I can afford to work in this restaurant anymore. So I went in and I asked my boss for a raise. He offered me 25 cents extra an hour. I said, I can't do that. And he said, okay, I'll offer you 50 cents an hour. And I walked out that day and I said, no. I'm earning right now at 26 years of age, less money than I did when I was 19. So I went in a week later and I quit because, you know, there's a saying you can't fall off the ground. And that's where I was. I felt like I was on the ground. It couldn't get any worse. I quit. I went on Craigslist again and I found a job, somebody looking for a tech company looking to cater for breakfast. I went in and I made some breakfast for them. And from that one opportunity, I created my catering business from that, which was I got into the door of this one tech company and I started to bring on more clients after that. I will tell you, I had no money starting up the business. I have no business background at all. One thing about me is that I'm very determined. I wasn't going to give up and I wasn't going to be beaten. So I worked incredibly hard and I was seeing that there was a lot more money coming back into Silicon Valley and into tech companies. And my job with this first initial company was they said to me, they kind of hired out engineers to other companies. They said to us, listen, we have an office full of, at that time, it was around 50, 60 engineers. There's businesses coming in to work with these guys, but they're 22 years of age, they're 25 years of age, and they're up all night playing computer games, and then they stroll in here at 11 o'clock in the morning. Your job is to get them in here before 9 because there's people waiting for them and they're being billed for these guys. So I was like, okay, like I'll see what I can do. It's like, this is all you have to do. Just get them in the door. And then one Friday, they came into work and they strolled in late. It was after 9 o'clock, but they slowly started to stroll in. And I had made red velvet pancakes with cream cheese frosting and a butter pecan glaze. And they almost lost their minds because what they'd been used to was cartons of scrambled eggs, bacon that had already been pre-cooked, and fruit salad that was already pre-chopped that the caterer had bought from somewhere. And that's just not me. I'm a professional chef with too much experience to do that. So that was the beginning. The red velvet pancakes was the beginning of it. And this was years ago, Jessie, when these recipes weren't even on Pinterest. Now you like look at them up and you see like, oh, everybody has a cinnamon roll pancake. And I made these, I don't know, gosh, a long, long time ago. The breakfast became more elaborate, more over the top, and just kind of more unique. And that's what it's like. If somebody's going to hire me to do something, I really have to bring to the table what no other chef is going to do. And that was the beginning of that.
When you left catering and moved over to your website and made that a full-time job, were you already kind of doing both at the same time, like catering but also blogging? Or did you literally quit and then start Bigger Bolder Baking?
I quit and I started Bigger Bolder Baking. The thing about my catering business was I loved it. Within the first few months of leaving my job at the restaurant and starting catering, I had like quadrupled my salary. The thing about it was I was getting up early. I was still in the office at 6:30 in the morning. And my days were shorter, but, you know, I was still kind of doing the grind of, you know, in the kitchen early in the morning and like going home and prepping and all the stuff. My fridge was, you know, in my apartment in Hayes Valley in San Francisco was full of fruit and all the things. And I was just a little bit tired of it. And I had these feelings. My husband, who came from an entertainment background, who worked at Lucasfilm, Pixar, and then also in gaming companies, did LucasArts and Zynga and EA Games. What he's most passionate about is entertainment and media. You know, he came up with the idea. He was like, I want to produce something and I want you to be I want you to host it. And I was like, well, the only thing I know how to do is bake. So I hope you wanted to produce something about baking. And he said, yeah, like I want to produce a baking show. And we just celebrated, this was 10 years ago because we just celebrated our 10th anniversary of Bigger Bolder Baking. Over 10 years ago, we had this conversation and we were tired. We were tired of working for other people. We wanted to take control of our own destinies. And, you know, we felt like, you know, we were experts in our space. So why not combine our two passions and go and create something together? So I did. I closed my catering business. Kevin quit his job. There was moments of like, what did we do? Like, this is the craziest thing. We never didn't believe we weren't going to make it work, if that makes sense. We knew we would make it work.
You have made it work to the tune of 2.75 million subscribers on YouTube, which is incredible. You have the blog, you have 2 cookbooks. I cannot believe how ahead of the curve Kevin was. I mean, it is so
right?
hard. Kevin, I mean, I got to meet this guy.
You too.
I mean, that's amazing because now YouTube is impossible to break into, or at least what I've been told, if any of us have YouTube fantasies, it's so hard to break into it. And I think that the fact that you guys were doing that so long ago, where it was exciting and new and fresh, and oh my gosh, who's this fabulous Irish baker making these fabulous, easy recipes for me. I mean, I'm not surprised you cracked the code, but I'm really impressed. Would you say that dessert style has sort of stayed the same since your catering days, or kind of really fell into place or took form with the YouTube channel?
That's a great question. I think my style would be quite similar to your style. I come from a professional background, and I know what it's like to make complicated recipes. That was never, ever my style. I worked in many fine dining kitchens. It was never my style. What I did with Bigger Bolder Baking was I really, over the years, we started out doing like over the top recipes. And then over time, especially as I got older, when I started Bigger Bolder Baking, I was 31. Now I'm 41. And after writing 2 books also, I like simple ingredients, stuff that you will have in your pantry. If I don't have it in my pantry, and my pantry is bare bones, I have brown sugar and granulated sugar like the rest of us. I do not have a whole pile of funny ingredients. And if the ingredients aren't in my pantry, they're not going to be in yours. So there's very few recipes on my site that will require special ingredients, special equipment. Really, my style is simple ingredients, simple technique. And I know you agree with me here. Just tell me what I need to know. Don't give me the fluffy stuff. Just tell me what I need to know. And that's in baking, and that's just me in life in general. Tell me what I need to know in the recipe, and then I'll go do that. And that's what we do in ours. We keep the recipes to around, and in the books also, around 10 steps, just what you need to know. Anything else can be confusing, especially if you're a novice baker. I don't know if you remember this, Jessie, but like as a novice baker, it's like, I don't want to confuse people with information. They're like, wait a second, now you said this, but then you said that. So which one is it that I do? So I really, over the years, especially after we've answered over 1 million comments across all social media. I know where people can fall down in recipes. I know where they might struggle. So I am like an editing ninja when it comes to editing our recipes. And I worked with editors over the year about editing the recipes, and I've just gone back to doing it myself because I just want it to be exactly what that person needs and as simple as possible, but for you to get the exact same results that I did.
I love that. Yeah. No, I can very much appreciate that. I love all my recipes to be on a single page of my books.
Yeah.
And then next to that is a photograph. I get very unhappy if some of the text has to go over to the other page. I'm like, I've said too much. I'm dying to get into our scone recipe, but I just wanted to briefly have you tell us about the first ever baking network that you're launching, the Bold Baking Network.
So the Bold Baking Network, can you believe, Jessie, that there's not a baking network out there? With all of the food content over the years on TV and on streaming, there's not a baking network out there. Kevin and I have been talking about this for years, probably 6 years now. Kevin said to me many years ago, I want to create a baking network. And back then, a little bit like YouTube, I didn't know what he was talking about. But now with all the fast channels, free ad-supported streaming TV and the Rokus and the Samsungs and the LG of the world, there's not baking-focused channels. And that's what Kevin and I are creating with our content, with other bakers who have different expertise than I have, because I am not an expert at everything, that come from different cultural backgrounds. There's such a rich tapestry when it comes to baking. It's like, how can we bring all of those people together in one place that will air all around the world? So that's what we're working on right now, and we're hoping for it to launch early Q2.
We'll be right back. Today's episode is presented by California prunes, the best kind of prunes out there. I'm a big fan of California prunes for 2 reasons. They're a great addition to your pantry when it comes to smart snacking and baking. California prunes are good for your gut, your heart, and even your bones. They contain dietary fiber and other nutrients to support good gut health and vitamin K, copper, and antioxidants to support healthy bones. I've started making myself a daily smoothie, which is a great vehicle for incorporating healthy foods into your diet. One of my favorite combinations right now is blueberries and kale with some prunes added for natural sweetness and depth of flavor. When it comes to baking, you can use California prune puree to replace some of the sugar, eggs, or fat in a recipe. It's super easy to whip up. Just blend prunes and water together, and voila! You can also add California prunes to any treat that calls for dried fruit, like bread, scones, cakes, and cookies. Prunes pair well with ingredients like chocolate, caramel, honey, coffee, even chilies. They also add sweetness and depth to savory recipes like chicken marbella, sauces, or stews. For recipe ideas and more, be sure to check out the California Prunes website at californiaprunes.org. Happy baking and happy snacking. I've got great news, listeners. Jubilee 2024 is taking place Saturday, April 20th at Center 415 in Manhattan, and tickets are on sale now. Jubilee is the largest gathering of women and culinary creatives in the food and drink space in the U.S. It's a beautiful day of conversation and connection, and I hope to see you there. You can learn more and snag tickets at cherrybomb.com. Now back to our guest. Now we get to talk about scones. These are your best evers. They are a tried and true classic scone, which you describe as having a crunchy, crackly, slightly sweet exterior and then a moist and dense interior with a lightly sweet flavor. Now, why are Irish scones the best? And does it have something to do with the fact that you keep them round and we in the United States seem to want to turn them into triangles?
You know, the triangle things, I don't get it. I need somebody to explain that to me. Because when I came here 17 years ago, people were like, would you like a scone? I was like, I would, but that's not a scone. And why is there icing on it? I don't get it. They are so different. In every cafe and bakery across the country in Ireland, there's going to be freshly made scones every single day. It's like when you go to New York and you go to get bagels, you're going to get freshly baked bagels, right? You're not going to get day-old bagels. Every single day, scones are made. People have them for breakfast. They'll have them for what they call 11s, which is when you have that kind of in between lunch and breakfast. And then they will have them for lunch or for afternoon tea. We eat them all day long. It is a big part of our lifestyle because we're a nation of tea drinkers. We love to sit down and have a chat. And we will often do that with a cup of coffee, a cup of tea and a scone. So Irish scones, like I said, when you go anywhere in the country, you're going to get them freshly made. They're lovely and light. They should be crispy on the outside. They should not be dry. They should not be dry. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of people experience here in the US. And here's the one thing, Jessie, and I don't know how you eat your scones, but often I find here, the intention is not to put butter on it. But in Ireland, you cut it open and you put butter. And if you don't do butter, you can do jam or whatever, but you're not going to eat it dry. Nobody eats them dry. You do butter or butter and jam and cream, whatever. But you would never just eat it as it is, and the whole ritual of is to open it up, put butter on and have the whole thing, which makes it a whole different experience.
So first things first, we're going to take a large mixing bowl. Do you like a glass bowl? Do you like a metal bowl?
I do a lot of glass bowls. I have to say, a lot of my baking that my mum did when I was growing up was mason and cash bowl.
Yeah.
Those lovely big heavy bowls.
Yeah, I love those.
Yeah.
So in a large mixing bowl, we're going to add some self-raising flour. We call it self-rising, but I think it's exactly the same thing. But is there any difference between an Irish self-raising and an American self-rising? Like, is yours maybe softer than ours and ours has maybe salt and yours doesn't?
Yours has salt.
Ours has salt and yours doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't realize that until I tasted it a little while later and I looked it up and I was like, something's not right here. But it does. It has salt. And a lot of people don't know that. I didn't know it until I moved to the US. But often it's not a huge amount of salt that's going to make your baked good too salty. And we can get into that when we talk about salt and everything. But I think that's, as far as I know, just the difference. I think they do give you the same kind of tender result.
And is self-raising or self-rising flour traditional in all Irish scones, or it's just the way your mom made them and the way you like to make them?
It can be both. Self-raising flour or a flour that we call cream flour. There's a brand in Ireland called Odlums, and these guys would make a cream flour. That's kind of more akin to between a cake flour and a all-purpose flour.
Okay.
So I don't want to confuse matters. So you're talking all-purpose or self-raising.
And I love that you let us know that if you want to make your own self-rising or self-raising, it's 1 cup of all-purpose plus 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and then you sift that together. I love using self-rising flour, I won't lie, and I do try to find different places to use it. But why do you think it is better than just adding the leavening and the salt yourself?
I've done it both ways. So I don't know if I would say one was better than the other. I just love the results of this recipe.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah. I've done it both ways. I do find sometimes you get a bit of a better lift with the self-raising flour.
Yeah. I also read that although you didn't necessarily do this in your last cookbook, you also kind of like to use cake flour sometimes in scones.
Yeah.
And I loved reading that because I like to do that with my biscuits. I like to use some all-purpose and some cake. And biscuit dough is similar to a scone dough. So I appreciated that. And it adds like a tenderness.
It absolutely does.
I find. Yeah.
We did tests on it one day in my house because that's the kind of weird stuff that we do. And it really does, it gives you a more tender crumb for sure.
So now we're going to use a cheese grater to grate frozen salted butter. And we're going to use the largest holes on the grater. Is there a particular brand of grater that you like or just a sturdy one does the trick?
A sturdy one does the trick. I have an OXO one. And I have to say, and I love OXO tools. So that's the one that I have in my house.
Yeah, me too. Very sturdy. We're going to grate the frozen butter on the cheese grater. And I love that you call for salted butter because that's a little bit unusual. Tell us why you love salted butter in your baking.
I do personally love salted butter in my baking. A lot of people ask me, will it end up too salty? And I know salt varies in butter. Well, people are like, well, I don't know. I can't be sure of what results I'm going to get. I use salted butter in everything, in all of my baking. I just do. I've never had somebody else say to me it was too salty. Now, factoring in that there is also, if you're in America, there will be a little bit of salt in your flour also, but I've still never had an issue.
Yeah, I love that because I think there is such a discussion that you hear all the time between people who bake and pastry chefs and the salted versus unsalted. And I think for so long, the word on the street was, oh gosh, it has to be unsalted. You need to control your salt level. But I kind of agree with you. I'm not sure that's true. I had my friend Samantha Senevaratna on the show because she had a cookbook that came out this past fall, and she always uses salted butter. She tells people they can use unsalted. She don't want to upset anyone. But if she's baking at home, that's what she has. So I really appreciate that.
People always ask me, I do say it's preference. That's my preference. If that's not your preference, then do it your way. If you have to restrict salt in your diet, that's grand. But salt is flavor. Salt is not adding saltiness to whatever. It's enhancing the vanilla, it's enhancing chocolate and all your other ingredients. So it's really important in your baking in general.
Yes, it's a seasoning, not
It is. It's a seasoning, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, if you don't have a grater, you can use a pastry cutter. Do you like a OXO pastry cutter or do you have a specific brand of pastry cutter?
Yes, get a good pastry cutter because I've had a few break on me. OXO one is good. And I do like to use a pastry blender. But also originally in Ireland, you're talking about using your fingers if your butter is not frozen.
So we're going to use a pastry cutter if we don't have the grater. We're going to cut or rub the butter into the flour until fully crumbled and resembles coarse breadcrumbs. And I know the reason, but just if you can explain why frozen butter is important here rather than, well, definitely not room temperature, but why it's even better than like what we usually see in a recipe, which would be cold butter.
So it's even better because a little bit like with pastry making and also like biscuit making, like you mentioned there, scones are very similar. So we want to keep everything as cold as possible. Using frozen butter means that, it'll go into your dough cold. Once it's grated, it starts to defrost. But what we're trying to do is get our scones made and whipped up as quickly as possible to not put our hands in there too much. So by grating it in means you're not putting in your hands. You're not warming up butter. You're not making a dough greasy. And you're going to be able to easily combine it and get it into the oven. Once a cold dough goes into the oven and the butter hits the hot oven, it will start to create steam. That steam will create layers in your baked good and it will start to evaporate. So cold butter is super important in scones, in pie crust, in biscuits to give you a lovely lift and to give you a little bit of flakiness.
So we're going to stir in some granulated sugar, some baking powder. So we're adding additional baking powder, even though there's a little bit of leavening in our flour. And then some raisins, which is very traditional. Mm-hmm. And I think you've said that you don't want to have a scone unless there's some raisins. Like raisins are important to you.
Me personally, there's a cafe near my house in Wexford called Kelly's Cafe. And when we don't get there by 11:30, the raisin scones are gone. And then, and I know it's a very sad story, but when they say to me like there's only plain scones, it's like no, it doesn't. You're literally offering me nothing. I need a raisin scone. I'll be back here tomorrow.
Yeah. I love that. So in a small mixing bowl, we're going to whisk together. And do you have a favorite type of whisk? Is it OXO again? Is it something else?
I do have an OXO, actually, funny enough, but it's a little bit of anything. Because I'm so well stocked in my kitchen, we have Amazon Basics, we have a little bit of everything, you know?
Yes, of course. So in a small mixing bowl, we're going to whisk together some eggs. And are eggs traditional in scones?
Yes. In Irish scones, yes. Not as much in British scones, but definitely in Irish scones.
Okay. So we're going to whisk some eggs and some milk. And you can substitute buttermilk, yes, for the whole milk if you'd like?
You can. You don't need to, Jessie, because you don't need an acid in this to react with the baking powder. If we were doing a scone with baking soda, then you would need that acid. We just need liquid. So we do full fat milk, and you can also, which is more expensive, and you don't always have it, but you can also do cream, and that gives you great results too.
I have to say, one of my favorite kinds of scones is like a cream scone where you don't even add butter at all and all your fat comes. I love it, and you can relate to this because it's so incredibly easy, but then it's also so incredibly tasty. So I love.
They are delicious.
I kind of use cream with abandon. I know people are like, oh my God, so much fat, that's so extra. And I'm like, yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's how we're doing it.
So we're going to pour our egg and milk mixture into our flour mixture, and we're going to stir maybe with like a flexible spatula. And is there a brand of spatula that you love, or is it, again, a wide variety?
A wide variety. I also often, honestly, for this step, I use a fork also.
Oh,
I'm
nice.
a devil for a fork.
That.
I'm always using a fork to pull together biscuits and pastry doughs.
I love that. So we're going to stir together, maybe with a fork, until a soft dough forms. And we're going to add a little bit more liquid, maybe a splash of milk if we need it to just help bring all those floury bits together. Then we're going to transfer the dough to a floured work surface. And are we flouring our work surface with additional self-rising or just all-purpose?
Just all-purpose. So your little flour shaker. Yeah, I usually just, for any flouring surfaces, I always do all-purpose.
Okay. And then we're going to press the dough into like a 1-inch thick. Is it a round at this point, or a rectangle? What, a round?
Your dough is a round, yes.
And then we're going to cut the scone with round 3-inch cookie cutters. And now we're going to gather any of the scraps, reflatten them, and cut more scones. We're going to place the scones onto a baking sheet. Brand of baking sheet that you love? You like something sturdy?
Nordic ware. I do like something sturdy. I like Nordic ware. I like heaviness in my pans.
Yeah.
And just something that's going to last me a long time because we get so much use out of them.
Yeah, of course. And now we're going to line the pan with parchment paper, brush the scones with egg wash. And I wondered if you have an egg wash technique. Like, do you like to add a little salt, a little milk, or what's your egg wash made of?
I never heard anybody add salt. Do you do that?
Yes. Yeah, I learned about it from a pastry chef here in New York. The salt breaks down the white so that the white and the yolk can be emulsified and come together a little bit more easily. And it's kind of delicious because you're also, like we were talking about, adding a little bit of seasoning.
Okay, I won't bore you with the details now, but I don't add an egg white because it doesn't break down and you end up with lumps. So maybe I can do a whole egg and add salt and whatever. But I do egg yolk and I do a little bit of milk or cream. This is what my mum did. The jug that you had your milk and your egg in, after I've cut out on my scones, I go in with my hand, not even a pastry brush, and I go into that jug and I brush the tops with my fingers. That's what my mum did.
Smart.
I hate, one of my pet peeves is washing pastry brushes. So that eliminates that need.
I always say bench scrapers are my favorite tool in the kitchen, but really my hands are my favorite.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a cliche, but they're extremely useful. So now we're going to bake at about 425 for about 22 to 26 minutes. And are you a rotator? Do you like to rotate your pans?
What I do is I leave them in there. And then if anybody is not looking as brown as the other ones, I'll pull some scones off and I'll pop them back in.
Yep. Now we're going to cool the scones on a wire rack for a few minutes before we're going to serve them with butter or jam or fresh cream. Is it whipped cream or is it clotted cream?
So in Ireland, we do usually whipped cream. And when we go home, because Kevin and I, well, like I said, we go to a place called Kelly's across the road from my mum's house. We always get scones almost every day when we go home. But Kevin will get jam and cream and butter. And I will just get butter. We do lightly whipped cream is always lovely. When I first started Bigger Bolder Baking, when I came to the US, people said to me, what's your recipe for whipped cream? And I just didn't get what they meant because I just didn't get it. I was like, what do you mean? Like it's cream and you whip it. And they were like, yeah, but what you put into it? You're like, you don't put anything into it. You whip cream. So lightly whipped cream on top of a scone with jam and butter is just
perfection.
The business. It is.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so amazing. I wanted to just mention 3 other recipes with you that I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about. First of all, just because it's kind of a twist on what we just discussed, can you tell us about your raspberry yogurt scones?
Oh my gosh, those are so good. They are really lovely. So that's in my second book, Bigger, Bolder Baking Every Day. And I love those. They are more tender. And for the bakers who are listening who know the magic of baking with sour cream, yogurt, buttermilk, it's a magic ingredient. It's another tender scone, but the liquid is yogurt mixed with raspberries. That scone, it is cut into triangles. It was done in a round and cut in triangles just to be a little bit different. It's a lovely recipe. It's not something that you would have to have butter with. It's kind of a complete scone. Really lovely, very tender, very buttery, and it's just a special recipe.
Sounds so delicious to me. Using yogurt as your quote-unquote liquid in one of those recipes, and I think I learned it over at Serious Eats maybe. I thought it was such a brilliant way to make extra tender baked goods like that.
Pie crust especially.
Yes.
If you added buttermilk and yogurt, pie crust and sour cream are my absolute favourite.
So delicious. And then can you tell us about your soda bread? And I think the recipe is based on your mom's traditional Irish soda bread, her brown bread.
Yes. So brown bread is another one of these Irish recipes that's very simple. And it is another recipe that's done by hand that you could whip up. You know, this is done around the country on a daily basis in people's homes and in bakeries. So it really has to be something that just literally has to come together. And in Ballymaloe, if anybody who's listening has gone or is planning on going, Dorina is fierce about making sure that everybody who leaves there knows how to properly make a loaf of soda bread. Soda bread is, you know, it's a basic recipe. It's a pound of flour, a little bit of baking powder, a little bit of salt and buttermilk. You know, sometimes it'll have an egg, sometimes it'll have butter in there. The secret when it comes to making soda bread is it can be quite dense if you overmix it. So you really have to go in a nice big bowl with a nice open palm and just very quickly, the quick as you can, just bring all those ingredients together. You know, just like with our pancake batters, lumps and everything are okay. Bring it together, shape it, get it into the oven because it will start to activate. That baking soda will start to activate really quickly once it hits the buttermilk. So you want to get that lovely spring in the oven and not sitting on the countertop.
Finally, can you tell us about some of the homemade ice cream recipes, since I know those are so popular?
The homemade ice cream, yes. So it is 2-ingredient, no machine ice cream. So it is whipped cream and condensed milk. And I have a recipe for condensed milk on my website, which I don't know if you've made before, Jessie, but it's simmered down milk and a little bit of sugar. It's very simple. And whipped cream, you know, so a whipping cream with 36%, like the highest you can get, 36% fat, you know, anything above 36% fat content. You whip it up. You add in your condensed milk, and you can see this on biggerbolderbaking.com and on YouTube with my videos. What you end up with is this lovely thick blank canvas. You can add a little bit of vanilla in there. The vanilla, being alcohol based, lowers the freezing point, so it'll be a little bit more scoopable. When you get this lovely thick billowy structure to the mix, it will make it quite scoopable. And then you literally just go nuts. And this is why one of the reasons why this was, I think, our second viral video. You add anything you want into this ice cream, like M&Ms or cookies or nuts, melted chocolate, fruit, whatever it is. The world is your oyster. You can literally create any flavour. And over the years, we probably have, 50 or 60 flavours of this ice cream. We've created Ben & Jerry's famous flavours with this ice cream. Oh, we use it for absolutely everything. It's such a fun recipe. And I'll tell you this as well, Jessie, we get a lot of emails from women in different countries around the world who say that maybe they are stay-at-home parents. They wanted to have their own income. They wanted to get back to work, whatever it was. And they've started making this ice cream and storing it in their freezer and selling it to their friends and family and neighborhood. We've gotten so many messages from women, you know, just all around the world saying that they created an ice cream business using this recipe.
Oh my gosh,
Isn't that funny?
Gemma, I love that. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today, Gemma. And I just want to say that you are my cherry pie.
Thank you. It was lovely to chat with you. Thank you so much.
That's it for today's show. Thank you to Plugra Premium European Style Butter and California Prunes for their support. Don't forget to subscribe to She's My Cherry Pie on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, and tell your baking buddies about us. She's My Cherry Pie is a production of the Cherry Bomb Podcast Network and is recorded at CityVox Studio in Manhattan. Our producers are Kerry Diamond and Catherine Baker. Our associate producer is Jenna Sadhu, and our editorial assistant is Londyn Crenshaw. Thank you so much for listening to She's My Cherry Pie, and happy baking.